Greetings and welcome to a new edition of the Gaming Codex, the show right to explain to you all the various words and terms used to describe video games and the video games industry. And today's term is that of the space sim. And what exactly would that be? Well, according to a general definition, a space flight simulation game is a genre of flight simulator video games that lets players experience space flight to varying degrees of realism. Many games feature space combat, and some games feature commerce and trading in addition to combat. That is a very broad way to describe this genre, but it is more or less accurate. In its broad definition, it covers games such as Kerbal Space Program, which is absolutely a space sim. It is one of the deepest probably because it lets you pretty much go into space and build your own rockets and calculate trajectories and take into account orbits that rely on gravity assist to get you to actually where you want to go. It is a very, very complicated game, but it is not necessarily the first thing that comes to mind when you think of the term space sim. That's usually if you're into the genre. If you're into the genre, the thing that comes to your mind, the first thing you think about is Elite, because that is a game that sort of defined what a space sim is. It is not just a game where you aimlessly fly a ship in space and it behaves according to the rules of Newtonian physics. Namely, that if you put on the brakes, it's still gonna go. You're in space. There are no brakes in space. You have to make your own. Elite added to that idea the concept of you're in a world that exists, that is to a certain degree simulated, and that you can interact with. There are space pirates to hunt, there's commerce to be done, there's things to explore, places to find, people to shoot, and many more. In that sense, the scope of what a space sim is sort of reduces a bit, but it is what most people familiar with the genre think about when they consider what a space sim is. You have the likes of the X series, you have Elite in all its forms, you have the Evocron series, you have pretty much everything here. Even games that are not what you would call open world. Well, open world is not really the correct term since it's more of an open galaxy, or at least an open solar system, fit in here as well. Like, I would say maybe Independence War. But be fair, I have not played that series in a long time and I forget about certain details of it. Free Space, absolutely. Any game that actually tries to give you control of the ship and keeps that control in a certain varying range of realism. Though to be fair, I would still classify X Rebirth as a space sim, even though you are playing an FPS in space and your ship can bounce off other ships with no problems. There is no damage if you actually do that. In all its other aspects, it is a space sim. Now, what is the popular definition? Well, that would be any game set in space. There is, at times, a problem with identifying exactly what a space sim is, because there may be games set in space. There was a Call of Duty game set in space that actually let you fly a ship throughout space, but that doesn't make it a space sim. That was not the core of the game. That was not what it was made to offer you. It was still a shooter. It wasn't about you exploring the galaxy or going around completing missions for such and such. So it doesn't fit. And at the same time, I know I may get some flack for this, but this is my take on the idea. If it doesn't give you actual control of your ship, it's not a space sim. To that degree, the original version of EVE Online was not a space sim. It was a great space MMO, but it was mainly an Excel spreadsheet with a graphics engine tied to it tangentially. In the current version, it does let you actually fly your ship. I think you can even spin it around, so that would make it more of a space sim. The older version where you just pointed and collected and it went there, not so much. You may say, well, it's a highly advanced ship, you don't need to fly it, it's got an autopilot that does it, and you just tell it where to go. Yeah, but at the same time, no, there's a key component missing there. And it's not missing because that would take away from the other aspects of the game, the economics. Because you had that in the X series as well. X2, for example. You could fly your own ship, do barrel rolls with it across the bow of Argon 1 if you wanted to. And still, you could maintain a fleet of ships that you controlled via the integrated systems, the AI management, the scripting language, the satellites you plumbed all over the galaxy. You could still control everything from your ship. You were the individual that was in charge. You could even go out of your ship. Whereas in EVE Online, you could do that, but you never felt like you were in charge of the ship. Though again, they seem to have fixed this in recent updates with recent expansions, so it may not be an issue anymore. From what I've heard, I've not actually had the opportunity to play it again since 2007. That also kind of disqualifies games like Star Trek Online, which although is a fine game from what I played of it, not nearly as deep in terms of the combat mechanics as Starfleet Command was, doesn't fit. It totally does not fit because it's a fully 2D game. You can't even flip your ship because the engine doesn't support it. It's not meant to be an accurate simulation of space. You can even bump into the planets and realize that, oh my god, they're actually quite tiny. So what does that leave? Well, it leaves everything else from Elite Dangerous to Star Citizen. Not necessarily those roguelike things that were set in space that shooter. Again, not everything that's set in space is a space sim. They can just be shooters in space, even if they're not Call of Duty. So what would be the marketing definition of a space sim? Well, that is not a contemporary show. Star Citizen raised how much money? At the tail end of the 90s, around the time when Electronic Arts realized that it had pretty much driven Wing Commander into the ground and sent free space did all it could do, the genre sort of stopped being all that popular in the mainstream. It still went on in the indie sector. Well, I wouldn't call Egosoft indie, but for a long time they were the ones keeping, well, them and the Evercron series were the ones keeping the light of the space sim alive. Up until Chris Roberts made a Kickstarter for a game that Electronic Arts did not want to publish. A game that they did not want to fund because they thought, okay, nobody's gonna play it. Who's gonna buy it? Turns out a lot of people, a whole lot of people. The game raising over $100 million for financing from the people that wanted to play this kind of game. And at the way it's progressing, I don't think that'll be enough. Personally, I think a game like that, what they want to make, that needs a $200 million budget at least. GTA 5 had like 400 million, though I think that's with marketing. And they're making something that makes GTA 5 look a bit small by comparison. And they're making it in the US and Germany where salaries are kind of high. They're not making it in Poland or Romania or, you know, somewhere where you could have gotten away with it a lot cheaper. And of course quality probably. But still, it showed that there is an interest in it. It showed so much that David Braben made a Kickstarter for Elite Dangerous, got a bunch of money from the people that wanted to play the game. They released the game, they've been updating it. It's right now going on the third chapter of the second or third season or something. I haven't really played it in a year, and it's still going strong. And it managed to do that because there really isn't that much competition. There's just Elite Dangerous and Star Citizen that isn't even done yet. It's playable, but it's far from being finished. Though there is also an X4 in development with which Egosoft wants to sort of wash away the sins committed by the what was supposed to be an Xbox 360 game, but they didn't get made for the 360 and just made for the PC instead, and a lot of dialogue about the philanthropist Lottie. But the less said about Rebirth the better, though they did improve it with updates. Not sure how much, since I have not played it in like 3-4 years maybe. But there's no movement from the AAA scene. Well, these are AAA games, they cost a lot of money to make and they made a lot of money, but from the established publishers, none of them are interested. For the most part, because making such a game requires effort, dedication, and the acknowledgement that it's going to be a niche game unless they actually properly market it to people that may be interested in it as much as people were interested in these kind of games back in the 90s. Because back in the 90s, they were system sellers, they were the thing, they were big. They were the first blockbusters. Wing Commander 3 was the first game to have a budget of over $10 million. Nowadays, not really that much interest from the big publishers. They will, however, do their best to nab them up if they can, which is what Take-Two did with Kerbal Space Program, which it now owns. Making something like that from scratch, though, highly doubtful. Also, yeah, there's No Man's Sky, I guess, which sort of kind of semi, but not really. No, not really. So closes this edition of the Gaming Codex. Come back next time and we'll talk about a brand new subject. Goodbye.